I call to order the Monday, October 1, 2018 Verona City Plan Commission meeting at 6:31 p.m. First up, we will have the roll.
Commissioner Tucker Long.
Here.
Commissioner Manley.
Here.
Mayor Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Lytle.
Here.
And Alder Gaskell and Commissioner Heinzen are absent and excused.
And we expect Commissioner Bear to make his appearance. Next up, we will have the approval of the minutes from September 4th, 2018. Questions, comments, motions on the minutes? Commissioner Lytle.
I'll move approval.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tucker Long. Last chance for corrections to the minutes. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Minutes are approved. Next up, we will have item 4, which is a public hearing specifically regarding the precise implementation plan for Market Number 5, located in the West End, south of West Verona Avenue, west of West End Circle, and east of Wall Street, that would allow for the construction of a 28,849 square foot commercial space. If you give us a little overview, Mr. Sayer, before we start on the public hearing.
Thank you. The request tonight is for a precise implementation plan for a plan development in the West End. This is the last step of the plan development process, the precise implementation plan, also known as the PIP. This requires a public hearing before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission then makes a recommendation to the Common Council, and if the Council ultimately approves the project, then the applicant is able to pull building permits and start construction when they're ready. So tonight, this is the public hearing, which is required, and then after the public hearing, staff can provide the report, and then the Plan Commission can then make a recommendation.
Thank you. And with that, motion to open the public hearing would be in order. Commissioner Manley?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. I'll second it. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And we're in the public hearing. If anyone would like to talk about the PIP for Market Number 5, now would be the time. Seeing nobody approaching the lectern, a motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
I'll move to close the public hearing portion.
Motion by Commissioner Tucker Long. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And the public hearing is closed. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. So the property in question is highlighted in yellow on the screen before you. It is the area indicated as new retail. Once again, this project is located in the West End along West Verona Avenue. It's located just north of the high school that is currently under construction. The new high school is being built approximately in this location here. This site has a long history, which is in the staff report, which I won't get into, but the most recent action on the project was the general development plan, which was approved by the Common Council in August. And as part of the general development plan, exemptions were granted for this project, which included a front yard setback exemption of allowing buildings to be within 10 feet of the right-of-way, allowing a drive-through to be located between a building and West End Circle. That's for the drive-through along here. And then finally, there were some exemptions relating to the signage on the property. The project itself is very similar to what the Plan Commission saw a couple months ago. Once again, you have projects that are fronting along West Verona Avenue. They are approximately 10 feet, they're approximately set back 10 feet from the right-of-way line. Staff continues to have no concerns with the location of the buildings themselves. The drive-through is in the same location that it was last time. The only comment on the drive-through is that once a tenant for this is known, we'll review the stacking requirements. So there are stacking requirements behind the window and also before the message board to make sure that cars are queuing up in the lane and not spilling out in the parking and drive areas. So that's something that we'll review as the project, or excuse me, once a tenant for that is known. Access to the site remains unchanged from last time. We have a right-in only off of West End Circle in this location here. We have a right out onto Wall Street, and we also have a right in to the site itself. And then full access will be provided to this private drive known as Stephen Way. That will also be signed as a fire lane, so the city will have the ability to tow cars if necessary from a police and fire standpoint. Staff has no concerns with the access to the site. The applicant has also added a no right turn sign here and also a do not enter. That was a concern that was raised at the Plan Commission meeting or the council meeting, I forget which one. But they did add that signage to there, just once again emphasize to people that they can't leave the site that way. Parking on the site, the applicant has provided 142 parking spaces, which comes out to a ratio of approximately 5 stalls per 1,000 square feet of commercial space. Staff is comfortable with this ratio. It's been consistent throughout the concept, the general development plan, and now the PIP, and that type of parking ratio will work well for this property. The buildings themselves are actually very nice looking buildings. They're using high quality architecture. It's very similar to what the Plan Commission and Council saw back in August as well. Staff has no concerns with the building designs. There was a exemption granted as part of the general development plan for this kind of wall mural as one of the signage exemptions that was granted. Applicant is looking at, like I said, high quality materials such as stone, brick, but it's a very nice looking project. The signage itself, this is the sign the applicant's looking at. These would be 2 monument signs, one at the corner of Wall Street, one at the intersection of West Rowan Avenue and also the West End Circle. The sign shown before you is consistent with the exemption that was granted as part of the general development plan, and staff has no concerns with the signage. It's actually kind of unique and fits with the project, so it's a nice looking sign. So that staff recommends, the Plan Commission recommended the Common Council approval of the general development plan for the West End development. I know the applicant is here tonight, and they'd be happy to answer any questions that the Plan Commission has.
Thank you for the explanation. Questions, comments, motions on the PIP before us? Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion that we recommend that the Common Council approve the precise implementation plan.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Bear. Anything further to add? No. We have a motion before us. Questions, comments from the commission? Everyone feeling good? We did talk about this one a lot. All right. All those in favor of recommending approval of the PIP for market number 5 to the Common Council, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we are on to item 5, which is a public hearing regarding the zoning map amendment to rezone 102/104 Lincoln Street from suburban industrial to urban residential, and a precise implementation plan, PIP, for the Lincoln Street apartments to be located at 102/104 Lincoln Street. That would allow for the construction of 90 family units. Mr. Sayer, if you give us a brief overview before the public hearing.
Thank you. So once again, this is there's 2 items on the agenda for this project. There is the zoning map amendment and also the precise implementation plan. These items go hand in hand together. The property right now is currently zoned suburban industrial. The applicant is proposing to redevelop the site for a multifamily use for 90 apartment units. So as part of that, they are requesting to rezone the property to urban residential, which is our multifamily apartment type zoning classification. As part of that as well, there is a precise implementation plan, a PIP, that requires a public hearing. Both items require a public hearing before the Plan Commission. And the Plan Commission then makes a recommendation on both items to the Common Council, but both will go hand in hand because they're kind of tied at the hip.
Thank you for that explanation. With that, motion to open the public hearing would be in order.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on the Lincoln Street apartment topic, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And we're in the public hearing. If anyone would like to talk about the apartments at 102/104 Lincoln Street, now would be the time. Seeing nobody approaching the mic, motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. All right, Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. So once again, the property in question is highlighted in yellow on the screen before you. This is the former home of Secor. Secor has moved out, and the developer is requesting to redevelop the property for a multifamily land use. The site was planned in our downtown plan for redevelopment. It's actually site 13 on the screen before you. And what anticipated in the plan was 72 apartment units and approximately 2 to 3 story actually apartment buildings as well. The applicant tonight is proposing that PIP that would allow allow 90 apartment units, 27 of which would be studios efficiencies, 40 would be 1 bedrooms, and 23 would be 2 bedrooms. The project itself would be 3 stories in height, and that would also contain about approximately 150 parking spaces. So the screen before you is the GDP, which was approved by the Common Council in July of this year. The PIP is before you, and it's, for all intents and purposes, the kind of the same looking project. It's an L-shaped building that would kind of front on Lincoln Street and along the bike trail as well. The western side of the site would contain be the stormwater for the property. There would be 90 underground parking units for the site, 60 surface parking stalls. Access has remained the same from the last time the Plan Commission saw it. Access would be from Lincoln Street. Staff has kind of encouraged the applicant to locate the access point as far north as possible, with the goal at some point in the future, if the property to the north redevelops, there could potentially be some type of joint access at that point. Staff has no concerns with the access, and staff also has no concerns with the parking as well. The building itself, from a design standpoint, is still very consistent with what the Plan Commission has previously seen. The one significant change was the previous submittals had a pitched roof to this. The applicant now is looking at a flat roof to the site. Staff is comfortable with that change. It will help bring down the scale and the mass of the project when it's, especially since it's adjacent to a residential area, but also with the VACT building across the street and the fire station and City Hall here, it does still blend and match with kind of what's in the area. So we don't have any concerns with that change. We did go through the rezoning findings of facts, which were included in the staff report, and staff believes that the rezoning does meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So that staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the zoning map amendment to rezone 102, 104 Lincoln Street from suburban industrial to urban residential, and staff also recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the precise implementation plan at 102, 104 Lincoln Street. And the applicant is here tonight, and they'd be happy to answer any questions from the Plan Commission.
Thank you. So first up, we are on the zoning change. Questions, comments, potential motions from the Plan Commission? Commissioner Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recall, perhaps memory is fuzzy, but we had questions about stormwater on this site and whether the change required any change to the stormwater management there, that there had been a plan submitted for review. Do we have any news on that front?
So yeah, stormwater management plan has been submitted for review. The review has not been completed at this time, but they do have a bioretention area on the west side of the property, which would accommodate stormwater for this site. I think staff did a high level kind of initial review when it came in, and we didn't have any concerns with it. Once that pond is in place, most of the runoff from the parking lot and obviously the buildings will go into that pond, and should help with any type of water issues in this area.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments, potential motions? Oh, Commissioner Lytle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since there was a public hearing on the agenda, this action was noticed as well for the surrounding neighbors.
Yes, so the notice that we provided was the Class 2 public hearing notice in the newspaper. We also mail notices to all property owners within 200 feet of the property. We also post this on the city's website. We do an email blast once a month for development projects as well on the website. And then we also put into the ground those public hearing signs, which is still out there tonight, hopefully, unless it washed away. So we have multiple kind of efforts, but yes, that was all completed.
Thank you. in terms of the way we structure this, they're hand in hand actions, but do we have two separate motions here? Is that the preference? Or?
Yes.
Okay. With that, I would like to make a motion that we recommend the Common Council approve the zoning map amendment to rezone 102-104 Lincoln Street from suburban industrial to urban residential.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Bear. Anything further to add? Okay. Got a motion before us. Questions, comments on the motion? Oh, Commissioner Tucker Long.
Just one quick question. So last time we looked at this, there were options A, B, and C, and now we're only seeing C. Are we sure option C is what's happening?
Mr. Sayre?
I don't recall which letters or how it was numbered, but this was the option that actually ended up going back to the Common Council and was ultimately approved by the Common Council as part of a reconsideration process. So this is the option that was, like I said, came forward and was ultimately approved as part of a general development plan. And this was always obviously the developer's preference to develop this way as well too. So this is the option moving forward.
Any other discussion on the motion? I'll just add for myself. I plan on voting no for this. I think the project has a lot of potential, but I've opposed it from the start, and just for consistency's sake, I plan on voting no. But I also recognize that I've probably lost the discussion. So, at least at the council, I have. But anyway, with that, unless anyone has anything further to add, all those in favor of the zoning map amendment change, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No, and that motion passes. Next up, we will have discussion and possible action regarding the precise implementation plan, PIP, for the Lincoln Street apartments, which of course are located at 102-104 Lincoln Street. And this would allow for the construction of 90 multifamily units. Anything to add, Mr. Sayre?
No.
All right. Questions, comments, motions on the PIP? Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for whatever it's worth, I thought the elevations with the pitched roof looked better to my eye. I think this is still a very nice looking building, and probably will be more consistent with the fire station and VACT. But I don't think it's. I think sometimes having a little bit of different variety of types of buildings and design in our city isn't a bad thing either, but the change from the pitched roof to the flat roof isn't a deal breaker for me, but I did like the other elevation better.
Thank you. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to recommend council approve the precise implementation plan located at 102 and 104 Lincoln Street.
Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lytle. Anything further to add? Okay. Any further discussion on this topic? Seeing none, all those in favor of the precise implementation plan, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. And that motion passes. Next up, we are on to item 6, discussion and possible action regarding a certified survey map to create 2 lots at the northeast corner of Liberty Drive and Clarity Street. Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. The request tonight is to create 2 lots in Liberty Business Park. Immediately north of the kind of flex industrial buildings that are out there. There are 2 existing lots there right now, so basically what would happen is this lot line on the existing lots would be shifted to the west. So once again, the existing lot line is the dashed line here. That would be shifted to the west. And the purpose of the CSM is that Attainment Company, which is actually located in Verona, is looking at purchasing and acquiring Lot 1 for their future expansion. Staff has no concerns with this request. It's just actually a simple lot line shift, but it does require a CSM and does require approval by the city to accomplish this. But we are fully supportive of the CSM and then ultimately working with Attainment as well too. So staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approval of the CSM to create 2 lots at the northeast corner of Liberty Drive and Clarity Street. I know the applicant is here tonight and should be happy to answer any questions from the Plan Commission.
For the sake of discussion, I will move that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council to approve the certified survey map to create 2 lots at the northeast corner of Liberty Drive and Clarity Street. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Manley. I have nothing to add. Any questions, comments on the motion? Commissioner Manley?
I think this is worthy of support when these developments are platted. In many cases, years ago, the lot lines are somewhat arbitrary, and then as time moves on and people become interested in the properties, it makes sense to shift the lot lines to accommodate the needs of the potential buyers. So I'm going to support it.
I agree, it makes sense. Further questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of creating the certified survey map to create 2 lots at the northeast corner of Liberty Drive and Clarity Street, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? And that motion passes. Next up, we will have item 7, discussion and possible action regarding the initial review of a proposed indoor commercial entertainment land use to be located at 507 Bruce Street to allow for a coffee, cafe, and beer bar. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. This is an initial review for 507 Bruce Street, which is highlighted in red on the screen before you. The property in question is right across the street from Fireman's Park. There's no action on this tonight, but this has, with an initial review, the Planning Commission has the opportunity to provide feedback and comments to the applicant before they would actually come forward with a formal submittal. What the applicant's looking at doing, as Mayor Diaz explained, was they're looking at a cafe and beer bar for the SBR Coaching Rocket Bikes facility, which has been recently remodeled. It's in the old, well, the building used to be yellow. I'm sure most of us remember the yellow building that was out there, but they've got into approximately half of that lower level and now operate out of that. They opened in August this year, and they approached staff about looking at kind of looking at this as a, obviously their current operations, but then looking at how they could expand and kind of draw on the features of Fireman's Park in the area and draw on the attraction of the triathletes that are training here. And one of the ideas they have is, which is a good idea, is looking at a cafe and kind of a social gathering place within the facility. The property is currently zoned urban industrial, indoor commercial entertainment land uses, which includes cafes and a beer bar, are not allowed in that district. So as part of this, the property would need to be rezoned to suburban industrial, and then the applicant would also need to obtain a conditional use permit for the actual use itself. As part of the kind of remodeling of there, I'm not sure if you've been inside there yet or not, but they did some extensive remodeling of that building. They actually built it out with the potential of possibly being able to use this as a cafe and a beer bar as well. The approximate area of the seating area would be about 1,000 square feet. They would have approximately 25 indoor seats inside the facility. They have a small type bar area that could potentially be used as well. And there's also a garage door at the front of the building that potentially could be opened up as well and connected into the patio, which is currently at the front of the building too. The patio itself, if the project does go forward, we put our standard conditions onto the patio as well regarding the fencing and the hours of operations that are consistent throughout the city as well too. But they have done an extensive amount of remodeling on the site internally just to make it an inviting place and trying to kind of expand the offerings in this area of the city. The site itself has a significant amount of outdoor space for parking. Behind the building there is a large lot that could easily accommodate a significant amount of parking there. The site itself is approximately 1.2 acres in size. Initially, staff is supportive of looking at this change. We think, as Fireman Park's improvements continue, having somewhat of a destination there, especially when it comes to people visiting Fireman's Park and having something in close proximity, that makes sense. Working with obviously the business owners, if they can capitalize, especially on some of the training people that come through the community, that also makes a lot of sense too. So staff is supportive of the of looking at this rezoning request and also supportive of looking at this as a kind of a conditional use and a change of kind of what this building was previously used as well too. So we're very open to this. So that staff recommends the Plan Commission review the submitted materials and provide feedback to the applicant. The applicants are here tonight, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that the Plan Commission have.
Thank you for the explanation. Questions, comments from the Plan Commission? Commissioner Tucker Long and then Commissioner Bear.
Would this be restricted to members of their coaching facility or specifically their customers, or is this going to be open to the public?
Mr. Sir.
So it'd be open to the public. That was one of the first questions, and I asked them as well because that ultimately impacts how we classify this use as well too. But no, their intent is to have it be open to the public.
Commissioner Bear.
I had that same question as well, so thank you. And second question on parking, it's not a concern, but I'm more curious if the parking lot is already there, or if that's a planned addition.
So there's parking in the back. It's currently a gravel type parking area. I know, we've had some conversations with the property owner about, having that paved at some point here in the near future. There is some, especially with the heavy rains we've had, there's been some water drainage issues back there that most likely potentially even paving it might help it. But there is ample space in the rear of the property. You can kind of see it on the screen before you hear that in the back. There's a large area. There's also an area on the side of the building as well too. There's some parking along there too. So the site itself has more than enough parking that's actually there and is very sufficient for this type of use.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just having driven past this property just I guess maybe about a week or so ago, it had been a while since I was on Bruce Street, and the improvements that have been made already I think are very welcome. And I hadn't even seen the inside and saw the pictures in the staff report, and it looks great. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I'm supportive of having a cafe and an ability to serve beer. The one question that I do have relates to the back of the property, the rear of the property, which I know at least at one time almost seemed like sort of a dumping ground for odd materials and so forth, and I wonder if any of that's been addressed, or if there are plans to address that portion of the site.
If the applicant would be willing to address that? And if you could introduce yourself as well.
Jessica Laufenberg. I'm the tenant with Rocket Bikes and SBR and own the businesses. Right now, all the debris and everything is all gone from the back end of it. I think they're using it right now as a little bit of a staging for some lawn care. I think there's maybe a truck back there, an Airstream, but it's basically completely empty. And I know they're working on the process of what Anna was saying, was getting rid of the water to get draining through the back. And I know there's some issues with the properties that corner up in the back that's causing some blocking. And I know Tim, who owns the property, is working on getting that to finish that up. But that's basically completely clear, except for maybe a couple items that are sitting back there. There is a side building there that I know they're eventually wanting to do some other stuff with that, and that's kind of outside of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Commissioner Lytle, is the question of the applicant or?
while you were up, but I didn't want to interrupt if you had further questions.
Yeah, sure, quick.
I know at one point, this was several years ago, they were advertising that building to multiple tenants. Are you all the only tenant in the building currently?
Currently, we are, and I do believe Tim is moving his entire business into the other part of the building. So basically, it'd be us and him with his current business.
So the landowner and
Yeah,
okay.
Aldo Partners, I think, and then they created the Bruce Street Real Estate, which is what actually governs that for the commercial property. They're moving their construction business offices into the rest of the building.
Okay.
But they're
Thank
not
you.
there yet.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other feedback on the proposal? Commissioner Bear.
I just think in future iterations of the proposal that we'd want to see a little more detail on the parking, and thanks for the commitment on the back side of the lot to clean up and make that more usable. But generally supportive. I think this is, given the city's rather large investment in the park across the street, that drawing more people to the area and making better use or the most use possible of that brand new space will be good. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll just throw on myself. Yeah, I think that's a great location for a beer/coffee shop. I think there's, I don't, you know, I think the redo to the beach is going to be really successful, and it's going to draw a lot of people there, and it'll be great if a business can benefit from that. Any further comments? All right. Next up, we'll move on to a public hearing for item 8, which is regarding the zoning text amendment to Title 13 zoning code, which would allow for the keeping and raising of chickens. Before we open the public hearing, could you give us a brief overview, Mr. Sayer?
Sure. So the request tonight is actually direction staff has received from the Public Safety and Welfare Committee, directing staff to draft an ordinance that would allow for the keeping and raising of chickens in the city. So this is there's two main kind of sections being amended as part of this. We have Title 7, which relates to the kind of licensing aspect of it. And then we also have Title 13, which is the zoning ordinance, which is the kind of the driver of why this is a public hearing and why this is before the Plan Commission here tonight. So any type of zoning text amendment does require a public hearing before the Plan Commission, and then the Plan Commission then makes a recommendation to the Common Council. And I'll go through the details of the changes after the public hearing, but the intent right now is if the Plan Commission has a positive recommendation on this tonight, this would potentially go back to the October 8th Public Safety and Welfare Committee on their agenda for a recommendation, and then ultimately would go back to the Common Council next Monday as well on August 8th, potential adoption and approval of the amendment. So with that, like I said, there is a public hearing required for the Plan Commission tonight, and then I can complete my report once that is over.
Thank you. Motion to open the public hearing would be in order. Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long, I think. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And we're in the public hearing. If anyone from the public wishes to comment on the zoning code change regarding the keeping and raising of chickens, now would be the time. Yeah, and if you could give your name and address, that would be great too.
Hi, I'm Debbie LaBerge and live on 405 South Jefferson Street. And I have had chickens for about 8 years now. I had a home childcare business, and I called up the city. We were selling them at Farm and Fleet, and I called up the city and said, you know, I want chickens for my daycare. How many can I have? And they just left a phone message and said, well, we're not zoned for farm animals, but since it's for educational purposes, you can have 6. And so then I had chickens, and we have a nice thing. We have a big fenced-in yard, and the only stipulation was is if any neighbors complained, we'd have to get rid of them. And nobody's complained. They're fun. The kids, people walking past, always stop to look at it. My daycare kids had a great time picking eggs and feeding them, and it's just a win-win thing. They ate bugs in my yard. They love earwigs. They even will eat the Japanese beetles if you give them to them. The fertilizer, it's just composted and thrown in the garden. There has never been any complaints from my neighbors, and it's always been, we have so much fun stopping and looking at the chickens. So they've not been a problem for my neighbors. They aren't noisy. We do not have a rooster. We did have a chicken after she was done laying eggs, did suddenly crow, and we got rid of her. They can always go out to a farm. But it's just such a win-win situation. And of course, we have eggs. They're free-range chickens. We do feed them, feed from Farm and Fleet, but otherwise they're free-range chickens, and they're just absolutely marvelous. And right now I do have 5 because the city said 6. So I hope that the number doesn't have to stay at 4. But I certainly recommend it. I don't see any problem. They can have a small enclosure. They can have a large enclosure. I actually have 3 enclosures for them to expand out into the yard. So if there's any questions for me.
Any questions? Commissioner Bear.
I will attest to having strolled past your chickens and seen them like last week, I think it was, and I was surprised to see them given this conversation that's come up and ones that were here in the past. So the question, just whether you've had a chance to review the language of this and if you think it's sufficient for what you have been doing or what you would like to do in the future.
Well, I did read it through, and I thought, well, 4 is kind of small. As far as licensing is fine, enclosures, I do have a big fenced-in yard, but like I said, if somebody has a smaller backyard, they don't have to have a real big enclosure for them. They don't mind. They're chickens. They just go wherever you stick them. But the licensing, I'm not sure what that all includes. I have no problem with somebody visiting and seeing where I keep them and how I keep them. Was there anything particular that?
No, that's very helpful. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment on the proposed zoning change?
Lori Everett. I live at 202 South Jefferson Street. We moved to Verona 12 years ago with small children, and I would have loved to have had chickens back then. We've been waiting this long for it to come up and become legal through the city. We, quite a few years ago, did some research. Like in New York City, you can have 10 chickens, and big cities can have more chickens. I'm just hoping that Verona would also allow the keeping, and 4 also does seem like a small number. I know that's what Madison has, but being flock birds, 6 also seems like a reasonable amount. So I really hope that you approve having chickens in Verona. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment on the proposed zoning change? Any further comment on the zoning change? Last chance for public comment, at least on this topic. All right. Motion to close the public hearing would be in order. Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. So, as I explained before, the request tonight is to amend both Title 7 and Title 13. And this was in the staff report, but I'll just briefly go through it of just what the requirements would be if you were to keep and raise chickens in the city. I guess we'll start with Title 7, which is the licensing requirement. It says any person who keeps a chicken in the city shall obtain an annual license each year. That's pretty consistent, kind of just licensing of animals, at least dogs that we have in the city. The applicant for that license shall provide proof of a livestock premise registration with DACAP, which is an organization as part of the state, so that they provide proof that they've obtained that. The applicant shall provide written notification to all property owners within 25 feet of the applicant's property stating the applicant's intent to keep chickens on his or her property. The applicant shall provide proof to the city that written notification was provided prior to obtaining a license, and notification is not required as part of a renewal of a license. The intent of that is just to let people know, neighbors especially, if someone's going to be having a chicken, that they'll be aware of it at least. The neighbor can't hold that up, but it's just once again just increasing that awareness. Any person renting a property will need to get permission from the actual property owner itself. Changes in Title 13, we tried to split this more into the licensing in 7 and then trying to regulate the uses, which is more of a zoning function. In 13, chickens shall be permitted on lots where the principal structure is a single-family detached dwelling unit, a duplex, a twin house, a school, or a group daycare center. Then once again, if it's not owner-occupied, they have to get the permission of the property owner. No more than 4 female chickens may be kept on a property. Roosters are prohibited. Slaughtering of chickens is also prohibited. Many of these conditions or requirements are consistent with what you see in many areas around the state. A chicken coop and chicken run shall not be counted towards the maximum number of accessory structures on a lot, but a chicken coop does count towards the maximum size requirements. So once again, it doesn't impact the number of accessory structures you can have, but it will count towards that maximum of 1,000 square feet, which we allow on for especially single-family lots. Chickens need to be provided. Chickens need to be provided with a covered roosting area, which is known as a chicken coop, and also an enclosed area in which chickens are allowed to walk and run, which is a chicken run. Chickens shall be kept in the coop or the run at all times. and the run shall be made, chicken run shall be include a fenced area with materials sufficiently contain the chickens. A building permit shall not be required for fencing an area over, a building permit shall be required for fencing an area over 100 square feet, and fencing shall meet all zoning requirements. That was a conversation we had with the Public Safety Committee or Commission, and their desire was to potentially kind of have these runs potentially either in the front or side or rear yards, so long as the run requirements are consistent of how we place fences in the city as well too. So the runs would be permitted basically in any yard. The chicken coop shall not exceed 15 feet in height and shall be placed on a paved surface or raised off the ground at least 1 foot, just for ventilation and kind of sanitary purposes. The coop shall be located only in rear yards and shall be set back a minimum of 15 feet from all property lines. And then finally, the last one is for properties that have frontage on more than one road or street, the rear lot line shall be the opposite lot line along which the lot takes access to the street, and chicken coop shall be a setback a minimum of 15 feet from all property lines and 25 feet from streets. And that's getting to the double frontage situations that we have in the city, where you have a street frontage in the front of the house, and you have in the back, you also have a road as well too. So with that, staff recommends the Plan Commission review the information. If the Plan Commission would like to move forward with this, there is a motion in the packet that the Plan Commission can potentially make, which would be recommend the Common Council amend Title 13 to allow for the keeping and raising of chickens. So obviously the focus tonight is on 13, but obviously this is an overall encompassing ordinance that impacts both 7 and 13. So, but ultimately the recommendation from the Plan Commission will relate only to that Title 13. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments? Commissioner Tucker-Long.
Quick question, are we just voting to recommend that we should change it, or are we recommending we should change it to the wording that's in the packet?
So the recommendation, if you go forward right now, would be the wording that's in the packet, unless there's a request to make an amendment to that language. So if you were to make a motion right now, if you wanted to make changes to it, you'd want to know what the stipulation would be if you're going to make changes, whether it's relating to the number of chickens itself or whatever else you might want to see changed.
And if we make changes to the wording tonight, does that change the process going forward, or does it still go to the Public Safety Commission and then to the council?
It would still go to Public Safety and Council, yeah. They would be aware of what the recommended changes are from the Plan Commission. Ultimately, they could, especially the council could then choose to accept those changes or not accept those changes. All it is a recommendation.
Or even make other changes too. Anything further, or?
I guess I would just say that I'm not a fan of the notification portion of this. I took a look at neighboring areas, and Madison, DeForest, Oregon, McFarland, Mount Horeb, Stoughton, Sun Prairie, Belleville, New Glarus, Fitchburg, Town of Verona, Lake Mills, Johnson Creek, Middleton, they all allow chickens, and none of them require notification for the neighbors. Additionally, we don't require notification for any other allowed animals to the neighbors, and I don't see a reason why this needs to be different. Also, since the neighbors can't do anything, it just seems to be inviting discord instead of giving, there's nothing they can do about it, so. And as far as building the coop and things like that, we don't require notifying the neighbors for fences or sheds or any other structures on the property, so again, I don't see why this needs to be different.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to respectfully disagree with Commissioner Tucker-Long on the notification. I think there's a couple of public policy reasons why I think it makes sense to have notification, and one of them relates to the fact that it's very likely that next door neighbors would be subject to the same restrictive covenants that apply to the property on somebody who would want to keep and maintain chickens, and it's possible that those restrictive covenants would prohibit the keeping of chickens or other types of farm animals. So even if we authorize people to get a license from the city to keep chickens, if their deed restrictions don't allow it, that would be a prohibition. and the person would not be, able to keep chickens. So I think that's one thing. And another point of it is, I knew that you could get salmonella from eating raw chicken, but I didn't know until I saw a press release from the CDC over the summer and a news story that you can get salmonella from touching chickens. And they put out a public health statement because 44 states had reported salmonella outbreaks resulting from keeping backyard chickens. And Wisconsin was one of the 10 states one of the states that had 10 or more outbreaks from backyard chickens. And I'm not saying that that's a reason why we shouldn't allow backyard chickens, but the fact that and children are more susceptible because of coming into contact. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to just at least let people know that somebody's intending to keep chickens, and then people can proceed accordingly.
Thank you. Other questions or comments or potential motions from the Plan Commission? Commissioner Weidel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was totally unaware that there was a process for registering with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection to be a livestock premises for urban chickens. Not that it's particularly my business or our business, but I'm just curious what that process entails. Is it go online, fill out a form with your address, and you're good, or are there separate fees for that, or?
Mr. Sayre?
Oh, off the top of my head, I want to say it's a 3-year license, if I recall correctly. I know we looked it up in one of the initial parts of this, but I believe it's I believe basically you submit and you kind of get it. I don't think there's really much to it, but it's a typical requirement that I know City of Madison has and other places as well too. So it's not an extensive process by any means, but I'm not sure if Ms. Holt, if you recall. Okay, she's looking, so maybe we can go back to that question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to follow up. I typically like the city to stay out of the business of being a good neighbor. I would like to think that if my neighbors were going to do something like that, they would let me know ahead of time. But I also think that this has been approached very cautiously, and I think there's been a lot of intent on a lot of folks' part to make this as successful as possible. And I think there's some upside in this one particular case to sort of including as part of the process the good neighbor step. I totally agree that it seems out of line with what people have to do for dogs and other things, but since it came to us in that form, I'd be inclined to stick with the notification requirement.
Thank you. Mr. Sayre?
So I'm on DACAP's website right now. It's a lengthy site. It's got a bunch of kind of information on it relating to maybe Ms. Holt, you want to jump in here too. But it says anyone who owns or houses livestock in Wisconsin is legally required to register their premise. This applies whether you own 1 or 100 birds. Doing so is free and establishes DACAP to alert you to disease issues that affect poultry. And then on there is a mandatory premise registration in Wisconsin. Talks about why it's important, what must be registered, who must register, and then the information you provide, which is your name, your primary premise, up to 3 secondary locations, name and contact of a person, type of operation, type of livestock, and then you can also renew and do all this online as well. So I'm not sure if Ms. Holt found anything different. Nope. So looks like it's a free program, but just have to prove that the person has actually registered for that. Looks like it's more on the notification side from a disease standpoint.
Thank you. Questions, comments, potential motions? Commissioner Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move to recommend the Common Council amend Title 13 to allow for the keeping and raising of chickens.
Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Tucker Long. Any further discussion? Oh,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say, I appreciate that this is an issue that's back, and we had a discussion, or the Plan Commission at the time had a discussion a couple of years ago on this, and I think that was a fairly unproductive conversation. I think this one has been productive, and it's good to have a draft, something to look at. And I sort of appreciate the members of the community who are interested in this and have wanted this for a while to happen in the city of Verona, and to keep up with our peers in the area that Commissioner Tucker Long mentioned, and I will support this motion that I made. Thank you.
thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. And we will move along in the process. So it'll go, just to clarify, Mr. Say, it'll go to Public Safety and then to the Common Council?
Correct. I need to confirm with the police chief, but as of now, we'll go to Public Safety on Monday and then also go to Common Council on Monday. And what would go to Common Council on Monday would be both Title 7 and Title 13.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 9, which is a public hearing regarding the zoning map amendment to rezone the property located at 2159 Range Trail to public institutional, neighborhood residential, and community residential, to rezone lot 218 of the Cathedral Point subdivision to neighborhood residential, and outlot 2 of Cathedral Point subdivision to community residential. Mr. Zabie, give us a brief explanation.
Sure, this is going to be a longer item, but once we get into it, I'll do my best to explain it and kind of talk you through it. But this is a public hearing tonight to rezone the Purple Cow property and then portions of Cathedral Point. Portions of the Purple Cow would be zoned public institutional. The intent of that is for the future public works facility to be located on part of that property. And then the rezoning in Cathedral Point would be to rezone a lot that's currently multifamily to residential. And then there also would be a small portion of the existing Purple Cow property that would be rezoned to a residential classification as well too. So there's, a variety of kind of zoning activity going on here. As part of any rezoning, it does require a public hearing before the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission then makes a recommendation to the Common Council. So I'll go more in depth into kind of the background behind this and the 5 kind of separate motions that will be necessary here tonight after the public hearing.
Thank you. With that, I will make a motion to open the public hearing regarding the zoning map amendment for property 2159 Range Trail. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And we're in the public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on the zoning change for 2159 Range Trail, now would be the time to do so. All right, I'm not seeing anyone approaching the mic. I will move to close the public hearing. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. We're closed in that. Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. So tonight with me, I also have City Attorney Brian Kleinmeyer is here, and also Director of Public Works there in Jacobson as well. So I'm going to try to talk the Plan Commission through the process here. If there are any questions, I'm going to probably call one of those 2, if not both of them up here as well. But there are actually 5 separate items on the agenda here tonight. We have an annexation, we have a zoning map amendment, we have a certified survey map, we have a preliminary plat, and we have a final plat. So we're going to kind of go through all 5 of those items, and I'll try to keep this succinct and as clear as possible. So the property in question is highlighted on red on the screen, red before you. The Purple Cow property, I think most of us are familiar with it, is generally this property here. South of there is Cathedral Point, which is a residential subdivision that Viridian owns and is developing. So the first item is annexation. So this is actually kind of turned on its side, where the top here is to the west, County Highway M is here, but this is the annexation request. So currently the Purple Cow property is in the town of Verona. The city is in the process of acquiring the Purple Cow property jointly with Viridian. As part of this, we need to bring the property into the city of Verona. So the annexation before you is to annex the Purple Cow property. It would also annex to the full extent of the Highway 18151. So we'd bring this kind of chunk of the highway into the city as well. And then we'd also bring in half of Rain Trail too. There would be a small town remnant, the Gus Farm, which is located along County Highway M. Town islands are allowed per our boundary agreement, but we would first need to kind of annex this property into the city. So that's the first item that that is on the agenda. Regarding the actual use of the property, the end of the day, this is kind of what the goal here kind of is tonight. You'd have an approximately 19.7 acre piece of property, which would be retained and owned by the city. That would be for the future public works facility. As part of this, we would also have I think 21 single-family lots. So we have the breakdown in the zoning. We have 12 that would be neighborhood residential, which is more of that yellowish color, and then 9 would be community residential, which is that orangish color. And those would be platted as part of this process as well. So this is kind of the end result that we're going to be looking at. To get to that, we'd have our annexation. We'd have the zoning of the kind of the property, and the rezoning would zone once again this to public institutional. The yellowish type lots, those would become neighborhood residential, and the orange would become the community residential. Once the zoning is established, we would have a certified survey map. The certified survey map is a 3-lot CSM. Once again, lot 1 would be for that future public works facility that would be retained by the city. Lot 2 and lot 3 would be acquired by Viridian for the last phase of that Cathedral Point subdivision. So that lot 2, if I'm going to flip back here, you have that kind of indentation of that cul-de-sac area. That's kind of the lands for some of that property in there. And that strip along kind of the east side there, once again, that's for some additional acreage for those lots to the south. So we have the annexation, we have the rezoning, then we have the CSM, and then ultimately we have the plats after that. As part of the platting process, just to point out, we're going to be vacating a portion of Cathedral Point Drive. Presently, that road was planned to be constructed here. To the east of that property, that was about a 2-acre piece of land that was actually planned and zoned as urban residential, which is our multifamily zoning district. All those would be rezoned ultimately to the single-family type land use. So we'd have then the plats after the CSM. We have a preliminary and final plat on the agenda here tonight, and the platting would create these lots through here, these lots 378 through 398. Less 19.7 acre lot would have already been created as part of that CSM. So at the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're creating a parcel for the Public Works facility. We're zoning that parcel for the Public Works facility. We're creating 21 single-family parcels that would be owned and developed by Viridian as single-family homes. As part of that, we would annex this entire property, and then we would rezone the lots to their appropriate classifications, and then also then plat the lots so they could develop these as homes. Access to these single-family homes would be a cul-de-sac from Steeple Point Way. That road currently just stops at the property line here. And then access to the lots in this location would be a public road that would loop kind of through the site. And that's similar to a couple other roads that are currently within the Cathedral Point subdivision. I guess before I kind of get to the motion, are there any questions just logistically what we're doing here?
questions from the Plan Commission?
Just initially, I mean, we have the annexation part. I guess are there any questions on the annexation if we're annexing the Purple Cow to the city? Okay. We have the zoning itself. I guess are there any questions on kind of how we're trying to set the zoning up? We're setting the zoning up once again for the Public Works building and then the single family areas. Any questions on that?
Commissioner Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious about the change from, the change that would apply to lots here 391 to 398, that would go from what's currently multifamily, correct, to single family. I'm curious, why? Could we amend this to keep the multifamily? Was there discussions with Veridian about that? Is that at their request? How did it come about?
It's a question from Veridian. I mean, that's a small parcel, and the challenge when you have lot sizes that are 2 acres in size is that what's allowed on there by ordinance is about 23, 24 multifamily units. Quite honestly, that's a number that's not too attractive to most multifamily developers because it impacts on-site management, and it's just a number from a management standpoint. It makes it challenging. I know they've been marketing that as a multifamily lot from the get-go. They've had limited interest, I think, most likely from the management side of it, that you typically need at least 50 to 100 units to have on-site management and be able to justify it. So you're probably faced with the dilemma then if you're going to look at that 2-acre lot and try to do multifamily on it, you're probably then looking at a PUD, and anyone trying to acquire that then is into that process, and there's a lot of unknowns at the end of the day. So Veridian felt very comfortable in kind of changing that just because of they've tried to sell it over the years and it just hasn't happened. If that were to stay as a multifamily designation, they would probably just need more acreage to make it work, to be quite honest with you. It's just you need a certain number for that on-site management. If you don't have it, most developers have a hard time being interested in it. So that's the reason why that came from them.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I guess I have one. So in the future, if Veridian or someone else wanted to come back and put townhouses or something there, like, or more houses per lot, they'd be allowed to.
We'd have to most likely do another rezoning. So we do have townhouses just west of here. You can kind of see the twin houses that are there. Yeah. So I mean, they could look at that and potentially rezone in the future,
Okay.
and then ultimately follow back up with the CSM if that's the direction they wanted to go.
Okay. Commissioner Lytle.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
Jump around.
There's a large portion of the housing developers' land that's designated as stormwater management. Is the intent that stormwater management facility would serve both the cities as well as, my understanding was we have to manage our own stormwater on site. So it's not to question the upkeep of a public works facility, but the question is, if they're managing something coming off of more an industrial as well as a residential, but you're saying that this would all have to be, the city would have to manage our own stormwater on our own.
We'd have to do our own on-site stormwater. All this pond is actually there today. So this property is draining to the north towards 18151. Ultimately kind of goes under 18151, and there's a channel ditch type feature that kind of runs down towards the Fireman's Park type area and the Locust Drive area. So we would, as a city, we'd have to do some type of on-site stormwater management, and mostly because this water, you can't obviously take it uphill. So when that facility is developed, that's part of that. There'll be a stormwater management plan, and that detail will be worked out of just where it's located and how big. But no, the city's stormwater will not be going to that pond.
So that stormwater, as you pointed out, is already there and isn't just for these additional lots. It's for the existing lots that are draining that way already.
Correct. You can see just a little bit off the screen here too. There's a pond there. They kind of connect and work with each other as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this question is germane to this portion of what we're doing, but looking at the public road that would service lots 391 through 398, the width of that road and maybe it's just an optical illusion, looks quite a bit more narrow than the other roads on the map, and I just wonder if the width is adequate for emergency vehicles in the winter when we're dealing with reduced width from, snow plowing, building up, and so forth. Is that a concern?
Yeah, we had a conversation when we first received this as well too, and I think we looked at it and we're comfortable with the width. I mean, the width is actually consistent with some of the other widths that are currently in the Cathedral Point subdivision. I think as we talked internally, if it becomes an issue with snow storage or vehicles, no different than a cul-de-sac, we could potentially look at restricting parking, especially on the island portion of that. I forget what the exact width of that road is off the top of my head, but I know it was consistent with what else we have kind of in Cathedral Point. I think Winchester Pass is the one that pops into my head. I know there's a couple of others out there as well too, but from a staff level, no, we didn't have a concern, and it's partially just based upon the fact that it's serving, I think 8 lots there. So it's operating very similar to a cul-de-sac type road, but no, there wasn't any concern from a snow removal standpoint in the winter or a public safety standpoint, no.
Any further questions? Mr. Sayre?
So once again, then we'll jump to the CSM. The CSM is an instrument that we're going to have to kind of record before the platting documents are recorded. So this will just create the lot for the city once again, and then it will also create the 2 lots for the Cathedral Point subdivision. So lots 2 and 3 would be conveyed to Veridian for the Cathedral Point subdivision, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, the plats would set up lots 378 through 398. So with that, I have a series of motions within the actual staff report. I won't go through each one. I'll let you guys read those if someone's ready to make a motion. But each one has a condition on it that states that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC space VH Cathedral Point LLC. So if there are any motions tonight, that's the one condition we do need that on, because this all needs to be conditioned upon the ultimate sale, because if that ultimate sale goes through, all these documents in essence will kind of trigger on top of each other. You'll have the annexation, you'll have the CSM that are recorded, and then you'll have the platting documents recorded after those two. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's a little bit different than we typically see. I know also, like I said, Brian Kleinmeyer is here, and so is Theron Jacobson, and they'd be happy as well to answer any questions.
Thank you for the explanation. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Manley.
All right, I'm going to do my best here. I will make a motion to recommend to the Common Council to approve the request to annex 32 acres of land to the City of Verona, with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point LLC.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Bear. Anything further to add, Mr. Manley? Motion Commissioner Lytle?
So is it a requirement, if we were only looking at constructing a public works facility, that we annex the property? I mean, we could build a public works facility outside the City of Verona if we needed to, right?
I guess technically you could, but then you're under a different set of stormwater requirements. You're under a different set of zoning requirements, and technically, yes. I think realistically, it would be. I would never advise it, because it gets very convoluted and complicated, because you're in a different jurisdiction and you're trying to build a facility in that jurisdiction. You could technically, but no. It's so much easier and cleaner to bring it in.
Right, and I'm not gonna even pretend to argue with that rationale. So at one time we shied away from creating small islands of town surrounded by city, and this is to me at least, a particularly small island of town. From a planning and administration standpoint, what are the downsides to that? Maybe there aren't any, but it just seems a little strange.
You know, from the city standpoint, we don't have any downsides to it. I mean, the town is aware of this, is comfortable with this. The only reason we can create those islands right now is because of that agreement. If we didn't have that agreement in place, we would be talking about potentially forcing the annexation of that kind of orange area on the map, which is the last thing any of us want to do. So from the city standpoint, there is no downside because we're contiguous to this already on 2 sides, 3 sides if you count kind of the north side here of 18151. So we have no downside. I think from the town standpoint, you know, it's an area they know we're growing into. They recognize that. You know, that the islands such as this don't create that big of an issue to them. I mean, quite honestly, there's no, I don't think they plow that part of the highway. I suspect we probably end up plowing it. So from a maintenance standpoint, you probably just have garbage from the town, but that's no different than a private service collecting it. So the town gets to keep the tax base until that property owner, if they are ever interested in annexing, then we'll annex them in. But in this case, I don't see any type of downside. Typically, we look at just service level. Does it impact the level of service, and does it damage the city or the town if this were to be annexed? And this is one it's contiguous for the most part, and it won't create any issues for us. It won't create any issues for the town. So, no, it's not a problem. The reason you're going to see more of these more often is because of that agreement, though. Because before that, we couldn't do it. And if we couldn't do that, that would be impacting us right now just on growth and development and how we do annexations, though. So that agreement's a good thing for us to have for that reason, especially.
And really quick, and then I'll let us move on. The annexation of the highway and right-of-way of the highway, was this one of the few sections of 151 coming through Verona that, well, I guess as you go farther west, it's not, but what does that gain us? I'm assuming there's no expectation, there's no change. We were already through some sort of mutual support, would be able to respond to a fire or a crash in this little section of 18151 just because of where it is located.
Correct. I mean, it's a cleanup of lines. I mean, I guess somebody could raise the issue if a City of Verona police officer pulled them over and you're not in the jurisdiction. I mean, cleaning up the lines are kind of, that's why we decided to bring that in. But I think this was the last chunks that we had. For that reason, we did only bring in half of Range Trail. Typically, we like to bring in the full width of the right-of-way. The reason in this case we did half was because to the south here, that's also half. So we wanted to try to keep just the jurisdictional lines consistent. We do have some issues around the city. I don't need to say where, but we do have some issues around the city just from a law enforcement standpoint over we have some lines that get difficult to administer from a public safety standpoint. So we're trying to, as these come in, to at least be consistent and try to make their lives easier when they're issuing citations or having to be out there to clean up an accident. So, but yeah, this is probably one of the last chunks that we have of 18151 in this area that needed to be brought in.
All right. Thanks for that refresher.
Yes, thank you for the explanation. We do have the motion before us. Any questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, which recommends to the Common Council to approve the request to annex 32 acres of land to the City of Verona with the condition that the approval become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point LLC. All those in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we have discussion and possible action regarding the zoning map amendment to rezone property located at 2159 Range Trail to public institutional, neighborhood residential, and community residential, to rezone lot 218 of the Cathedral Point subdivision to neighborhood residential and outlot 2 of the Cathedral Point subdivision to community residential. You've given us the overview, Mr. Sayer. Is there anything further to add?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Questions, comments, motions on this rezone? Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take another stab at this. This one's a lot longer, though. So I'll make a motion that we recommend that the Common Council approve the zoning map amendment to rezone Lot 1 of the CSM from the current classification of rural agriculture to public institutional, outlot 14 of the final plat to public institutional, Lot 378 and lots 383 through 390 of the final plat to community residential, and lots 379 through 382 and lots 391 through 398 of the final plat to neighborhood residential, with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point LLC.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second? Second. Anything further to add?
No, I think that was a mouthful.
All right, we got a motion. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Manley, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we will have the discussion and possible action regarding the certified survey map to create 3 lots at 2159 Range Trail. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Bear.
Give Commissioner Manley a break. I'll move to recommend that the Common Council approve the certified survey map to create 3 lots and vacate Cathedral Point Drive with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point LLC.
Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Manley.
One thing I'll just change on that, if you wouldn't mind amending the motion, the vacation will actually occur in the platting of it, not the CSM. So if you wouldn't mind removing that from the motion, that will happen as part of the platting process. That was my mistake.
So moved.
Okay. Is the second okay with that?
Second's okay.
All right. So basically the motion without the vacating part. Questions, comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Bear, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we will have discussion and possible action regarding the preliminary plat for the second addition to Cathedral Point to create 21 lots and 2 outlots located north of East Chapel Royal Drive and east of Steeple Point Way. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Manley. Commissioner Tucker Long.
All right, I'll give this one a try. I move that we recommend to the Common Council to approve the preliminary plat for the second addition to Cathedral Point to create 21 single-family parcels and 2 outlots with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point LLC.
Motion by Commissioner Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Lytle. Anything further to add? Any questions, comments? Commissioner Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious for Mr. Sayer, if are we limiting ourselves here to only single-family homes, or could there be also the sort of duplexes that you pointed to earlier on the sort of across the street?
At some point, they could come back and request that. It would take that CSM. It would maybe take some modifications in the future to look at something like that, but that's something that they could look at in the future if necessary. I mean, for the purpose of tonight, yes, it's to limit yourself basically to single family, yes.
Okay.
A change could happen in the future if they requested it.
I'm just thinking it's something I might want to encourage. I don't know that we want to bake that in now, but something that we may want to encourage in the future, just given that the backyard is the city. Not that we wouldn't be bad neighbors, but this may not be the most attractive property to have, snow plows and things coming around your backyard. It seems to me this may be a more attractive place for the sort of original intent, the multifamily or the duplexes that are there nearby now.
There would be a sizable berm along the backside of these properties as well, too. That was something that was talked about in the initial review of this. We don't have those details, they haven't been developed yet, but that's gonna be constructed and built there, so I mean, it's gonna, you know, it'll be sizable, but I mean, that, you know, I think will make the facility that's north of there, you know, a little more attractive, because you'll have that kind of buffer between those two, so, that should lessen any concern or some of those concerns.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thank you. Commissioner Lytle.
To continue my re-education process, the fact that we're approving both a preliminary and a final plat, can you, why were there two steps normally in that, and how are we able to compress them into one in this case?
Well, we can compress it anytime we want with the approval of preliminary plats. I mean, that's what we typically don't advise developers of doing that, because creating the platting documents is a costly procedure on their part and timely. And with this one, just for the fact that the city is involved with it, you know, the council's already kind of talked about this purchase as well too, and needing all these documents to line up by a certain timeline for closings as well. That's why it's being done this way. We don't want to make this a habit by any means, but the fact that this is a layered kind of process to it, and with the kind of multiple parties involved, including the sellers and the city and another purchaser as well too, it's unique. So they can be combined though. It's allowable, and we just typically don't advise people because it gives the Plan Commission additional time to, you know, think about things, mull things over, and you know, gives a little more, you know, better process long term. But in this case, this is about the only option we had, just from a timing standpoint.
Yeah, I would add that I don't see any reason not to, and also commend what you've been able to do. I know with multiple parties and all the moving pieces, this is not an easy kind of deal to put together, so hope to see it succeed. I think it's to the city's benefit to be able to take advantage of this property coming available, and as well as add some housing to our stock.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Tucker-Long, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Last up on this item anyway, we have discussion and possible action regarding the final plat for the second addition to Cathedral Point to create 21 lots and 2 outlots located north of East Chapel Royal Drive and east of Steeple Point Way. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Lytle.
I'll take one for the team. Can I just say what she said, final, preliminary to final? No.
You should probably read it.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we recommend the Common Council approve the final plat for the second addition to Cathedral Point to create 21 single-family parcels and 2 outlots, with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the Purple Cow property to the City of Verona and MREC VH Cathedral Point, LLC.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Tucker-Long. Anything further to add? Commissioner Manley.
Just a question, do we need to add the vacation of Cathedral Point Drive to this motion?
No, we don't. We'll, as part of the resolution that goes to the Common Council, we'll have that in there, but it'll be noted in the minutes that it was discussed, but no, it doesn't have to be in there as a condition.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Lytle, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we will have a public hearing regarding the zoning map amendment to rezone 1.32 acres of land located on the north side of Wayland Road, located approximately 800 feet east of U.S. Highway 151 to public institutional. If you could give us a brief explanation.
Thank you. Just for a brief introduction, this is a zoning map amendment to rezone the property highlighted in red on the screen before you to public institutional. This is another 4 kind of step process, one that I'll walk through after the public hearing. It's not as complicated as the last one, but any zoning map amendments require a recommendation from the Plan Commission to the Common Council. It also requires a public hearing before the Plan Commission, and we're in that right now. And the intent of this site would be to use it as a municipal well. So it would be a municipal well site on here for water purposes. So with that, we're in the public hearing, and I can finish my report after that.
Thank you. I will move to open the public hearing regarding the zoning map amendment. Seconded by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're in the public hearing. If anyone wants to comment on the zoning map amendment, now would be the time to do so. All right, seeing nobody approaching the mic, I will move to close the public hearing. Second by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. So for this one, we have 4 items on the agenda, and once again, they kind of all go hand in hand. So we have, once again, the property here is located along Whalen Road, approximately 800 feet east of 18151. It is highlighted in red on the screen before you. Once again, for context purposes, here it is in the map again. Anything in the kind of the shaded color is in the city. Not shaded, it's in the town of Verona. So the first kind of item on the agenda is the annexation of this property. The city has drafted a certified survey map that would allow for the annexation. This would provide a lot size of 1.32 acres for the lot itself, and would also include approximately 0.68 acres of land as part of right-of-way dedication. And the right-of-way dedication would be along Whalen Road and would also be along North Liberty Drive. The other half of this right-of-way was dedicated as part of the Liberty Business Park plat. So the first item is the annexation of the property. The property is adjacent to the city. It's adjacent on the west and also adjacent on the south. Staff has no concerns with the annexing this property since it is adjacent to the city. The zoning itself would be planned to be zoned public institutional. That's a institutional type use for the well site itself. That's consistent with other public uses in the city. Staff has no concerns about the zoning request as it accommodates the proposed use on the property. The third item, once again, is going to be that CSM. That CSM would create one lot and then dedicate the right-of-way. And then the fourth item on the agenda tonight is actually the building and the structure itself. There were site plans submitted in the Plan Commission packets. The building would be approximately 1,700 square feet. It would be set back a considerable amount of distance from Whalen Road and also from the future North Liberty Drive as well. In general, the site plan has a lot of landscaping to it. There are also some 3D renderings that were prepared. It's a typical, city building. It's intended to be, to house the equipment that's in there, but also not to stand out much, trying to blend with the landscape. Hence the reason for the plantings. That was one of the recommendations from staff, was to try to hide this as much as we could and try to make it just look, that's just a building back there, trying not to draw too much attention to it. The building itself is consistent with kind of other buildings you have in the city, especially the one at the corner of Whalen and County Highway M, our booster station. So staff has no concerns with it. Access to the site would be provided with a driveway from Whalen Road, and there would be a small turnaround area actually on the property. We do not have any parking lot lights, just from the standpoint of aesthetics, once again to draw attention to it, but mostly from the standpoint that people visiting this site will be doing that just to service the equipment inside. So it's not going to be heavily utilized. It'll just be used for a municipal well that will help fortify the system in the southeastern part of the city, and more importantly our business parks there as well. So that I have 4 recommended motions in the packet, and each one of them, except for the site plan, would have a condition upon it that it shall become effective upon the sale of the property to the city of Verona. So with that, I guess I'd be happy to answer any questions, but once again, we have the annexation to bring the property into the city. We have the certified survey map to create the lot. We have the zoning of the parcel for the well, and then we'd have the site plan potential approval by the Plan Commission for the building and structure itself. Construction timeline on this one, we're looking to start construction on this project before the end of this year. That's still our goal, and this site still needs USA approval from CARPC, which that is on their agenda for next Thursday. So once we have all our approvals lined up from all the bodies involved, we will start construction as soon as we can. But I'd be happy to answer any questions in the Plan Commission.
Could I ask a question about landscape, or should I wait till?
Anything you want to ask.
I guess I'm sharing. So I haven't looked it up, but the Princeton elm, I take it that's a variety engineered to be immune to Dutch elm disease?
Yes, I think any elm that we see nowadays is always immune to that, yep.
Good choice adding it. Is the staff recommendation to add a few evergreens going to be done?
Yeah, we'll talk with Mr. Jacobson, but that's something that could be accommodated as part of the project, or it could be accommodated by our Parks Department as well, too. We buy a lot of trees every year.
Okay, great. Commissioner Bear.
I'm curious about the shape of the driveway, why we need an L shape, why it couldn't be sort of straight to the road. Do we need access to both sides of the building? Could
I'll
we
answer that
save
one.
some? Go ahead.
Mr.
It was a grade issue. There's
Okay.
pretty dramatic hill that they're going up, and to keep the driveway accessible by vehicles and the construction equipment, we brought it in from the north. At some point when that North Liberty Drive is built, we can possibly relocate that driveway so it comes in off the parking lot directly, but that requires cutting that hill about 3.5 feet. But it wasn't really necessary as part of this project.
Okay, thank you. And I'd say generally, if we can save the green space or add more green space with shorter driveway, then and that would be my preference. But if this is easier and more cost effective, then that makes sense as well.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from the Plan Commission or potential motions? Commissioner Lytle.
It seems like we jumped straight to the site plan, but I guess that gives you an idea of the stuff we have questions on. Obviously, I don't want to know, and I don't think you should talk about in a public hearing the security protocols you have for municipal well houses, but I guess the good part of this is it's hidden from the road. The bad part of this is it seems pretty hidden from the road, so I would encourage you all to, obviously you're thinking about that, but just reiterate that that's a good situation to make sure kids don't decide that's the cool place to go do whatever they do on a Saturday night, etc.
Further questions or comments from the Commission? Potential motions? Commissioner Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, I will recommend that the Common Council approve the request to annex approximately 2.17 acres of land to the City of Verona, with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the property to the City of Verona.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Bear. Anything further to add, Commissioner Manley? No. Any questions, comments on the motion? Commissioner Tucker-Long?
Going back to where you said the hill was, where exactly on this picture is the hill?
It actually goes up from Wayland up the hill to the north. So if you go out there and stand on Wayland Road, that road rises about 6.5 to 10 feet to, when we're not even at the top of the hill yet, and then it falls off as you get further north and then heads towards Grandview.
Gotcha. Okay, and then coming off here, so the longer portion with the little dead end, that's eventually going to connect, you said, to Liberty Park?
That piece actually is really there for the city trucks to turn around if they're plowing it, to
Okay.
put stuff in there. This is just a driveway, so when Liberty Drive is actually built, it'll be built as a boulevard section off of Wayland. So this is really just access for the city utilities, trucks, and vehicles to get in.
Okay. Is it possible to turn the building so that we don't need the second parking lot on the bottom?
not really. I mean, we put the big parking lot down there because that's the lower end. It's also visible from the road to an extent. There isn't a lot of parking on the west side. It's really more of a delivery spot because those are the sides where the chemical feed systems are. So the truck will pull up and they'll unload their barrels or whatever they're putting in for chloride and fluoride into the building there.
Any additional questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Manley, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion passes. Next up, we have discussion and possible action regarding the certified survey map to create one lot on the north side of Wayland Road, located at approximately 800 feet east of US Highway 18151. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Lytle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion. We recommend that the Common Council approve the certified survey map to create one lot with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the property to the City of Verona.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long. Anything further to add? Any questions, comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of creating the certified survey map, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we have discussion and possible action regarding the zoning map amendment to rezone 1.32 acres of land located on the north side of Wayland Road, located approximately 800 feet east of US Highway 18151, to public institutional. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Tucker Long?
Adam, do these last two have to be separate?
The zoning and the site plan?
Yeah.
Yes.
I will make a motion to recommend that the Common Council approve the zoning map amendment to rezone Lot 1 of the CSM from the current classification of rural agriculture to public institutional, with the condition that the approval shall become effective upon the sale of the property to the City of Verona.
Motion by Commissioner Tucker Long. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Manley. Anything further to add? Questions, comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as read by Commissioner Tucker Long, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we are on the discussion and possible action regarding the site plan review for a proposed 1,740 square foot utility building to be located approximately 800 feet east of US Highway 18151. I just want to say I do like the landscaping. I think it's really great to see elm trees being planted again. And I'm glad to see that we are exceeding the points requirements, especially for a building that we want to see screened. To me, that just seems like a great reason to plant a bunch of trees. And once again, I agree with staff recommendation to throw in a few more evergreens. Any other questions, comments, or motions? Commissioner Bear.
And to sort of go back to my previous question about the driveway, would it be more cost effective to do something straight out to the future road or leave it as drawn here?
I was just thinking about that question, and the reason we can't do that is because right now, the way the hill is, that driveway would exceed 12.5% because of the hill. So until it's cut down, you really want to keep it on the north side, but once that road's built, I think you could easily move it south and go straight into that parking lot.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Tucker Long?
What's the timing on that road being built?
No idea.
No idea. Okay.
All right, I will make a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site plan to allow for the construction of a 1,740 square foot building. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Commissioner Lytle. Any further discussion on the site plan? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the site plan, say aye. 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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we will have discussion and possible action regarding a zoning text amendment relating to fences. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. So the intent is to have no action on this tonight, but one, to bring forth an item that I know I've gotten direction on from Mayor Diaz and Alderperson Cole on to take a look at this issue. regarding fences in the city. The issue that's being raised is in the case of what we call double frontage situations. That's where you have the front of the house, in this case along Poplar Way, and in the back you'd have another road. So you have actually two frontages on the property itself. And our ordinance, quite honestly, just is not as clear as it should be as it relates to some of the issues when it comes to these double frontages, and it's been inconsistently enforced over the years. So what staff is looking for is feedback and direction from the Plan Commission on trying to kind of clean up some of the issues that we have in our ordinance. So we're looking at kind of just in a draft with some recommendations was included in your packet, a red line draft. Looking at kind of cleaning up the definitions just to make them consistent with other areas of the code itself. We have an issue in our ordinance. We're talking about opacity. Opaqueness is how for example, the fence here is 100% opaque. It's board on board. The opacity here is approximately, looks like 50% opacity. Our ordinance is actually written by using the wrong minimum and wrong maximum. So one of the changes would, right now it has a minimum opacity of 50%, and the intent of that is to have a maximum opacity of 50%. So we want to make a change to basically bring the ordinance in that case in line with how it is meant to be written, and also how it's been enforced for over the years as well. And then kind of regarding the double frontage issue, we'd like to make a change that says for properties having double frontage on more than one road or street, not including corner lots. So this is only to the ones that have a front kind of facing road like here on Poplar Way, and it has a back as well. So just those and not the corner lots. The rear lot line shall be the opposite line along which the lot takes access to the street. Double frontage lots shall be allowed to have a fence in the rear lot. The rear lot fence shall be a maximum of 6 feet tall and a maximum of 100% opaque. So trying to clarify kind of the kind of what we believe the kind of the intention here is to be. So potentially people would be able to have, in this case along Cross Country Road, a 6 foot tall fence that is 100% opaque, in that kind of double frontage situation. In the past, how that's been enforced is typically it has to be a 4 foot fence that would be 50% opaque. So board, a space, a board, a space. So this change would potentially allow it to be 6 feet with board on board on board on board. So that's the change we're looking at making, along with the other kind of cleanup changes. But before we brought this forward with the public hearing, which potentially we would go forward here in November with that public hearing, we wanted to at least kind of get the feedback from the Plan Commission, kind of get any comments that might be out there. We have a limited number of situations where this applies. Cross Country Road is one of those. Locust Drive is one. There's I think maybe a couple on Whalen. So I mean, it's not. We try to avoid double frontage as much as we can, but we do have some situations that it's there. But wanted to give the Plan Commission feedback. I think there's pros and cons to changing this. Obviously, it gives the people along roads that have double frontage additional backyard screening and security. In the same breath, you will have in some situations where you'll have potentially a wall of fences going on the road as well too. So we've seen that in some spots in the city just by people doing this and not pulling permits, and we've also seen it over the years just by this inconsistent enforcement of the code. So you see that already in some spots of the city for those reasons. So with that, I just staff is looking for feedback and direction from the Plan Commission on kind of what you want us to do.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments from Plan Commissioners? Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the one concern that I have, and I remember I was on the council when some of these revisions were made, and there are people who have a corner lot that also have a swimming pool in their backyard and want to have a fence that's taller than 4 feet and that is 100% opaque because of the privacy that affords. And maybe I'm misreading this, but if I'm looking at paren F, height and opacity under F1B, we would be restricting fences that are on the street side of a house to be 4 feet tall and a maximum of 50% opaque. And I just wonder if that's what we really want to do.
That's how it's been written today, and that's how the current code is today. So the only change in that F1B is just cleaning up a couple shells of maize and then changing that minimum of 50% opacity to maximum 50%. But besides that, nothing else would be changing regarding how we've enforced that over the years.
But right now, I mean, I guess I disagree, because if I have a side yard fence, I can have it 100% opaque under the current code. And with this change, I can't have a privacy fence for my backyard if I have a swimming pool and happen to live on a corner lot. And I'm not sure I would understand why we would want to have that restriction. I can think of properties in the city that actually have a pool and are a corner lot.
Yeah, we allow up to 100% opaque on corner lots in that front kind of yard area, if it's set back 25 feet. So if it's kind of back to that setback line, that's where you can do that 100% opaque. I mean, there have been situations where people have built fences, and obviously not getting permits either. So I know there are cases around there, but my understanding from the building inspection department is it's always been enforced, though, if it's in the street, the front yard or the street yard, it's been at that 4 feet, 50% opaque. I know the ones that I've had to deal with from an enforcement standpoint on that's the position that I've taken, and so has the building inspectors as well too. So I'm not sure if the situation that you're aware of is, once again, if it's set back that 25 feet, that's where you can kind of build that 6 foot. And
it's not.
No?
Okay. Other questions, comments from the Planning Commission? Send the building inspector to your house.
Quite honestly, fences, we're not getting permits for fences. It's quite common. So I mean, it's it's a pretty common kind of thing that we see happening, because just some people don't know, or when you pick these up and read them, they're not the easiest thing to read either. Right? So you got to read it a couple times and go, oh, that's what it's saying.
I will say, just to add my 2 cents in, that I think it's really good that we're clearing things up. No matter what our ordinances say, they should be clear, and gosh, it would be nice. I guess Brian's still in the audience, but it'd be nice if someone could read it without needing a lawyer. I know it's a super old ordinance, but it would be nice if, like, just a regular Verona resident could look at the ordinance and know what kind of fence they could build. And I think that's what we should strive for. And I think, at least in this case, I feel like it is, as Mr. Sayre pointed out, a very limited amount of houses that are affected, but I feel like it's a much more fair system, and I know it's been enforced inconsistently in the past, whereas people basically want to build a fence that matches what their neighbor has, and they can't do it because we changed how we enforce the fence ordinance. And I think the fault lies in the way the ordinances are written. I think it would be really good if we could just clear it up and be good and straightforward, and let people build a fence if they want to keep their dog from having to run in the road or whatever other reason. Any other comments on the fencing? All right, seeing none. Next on, we will move on to number 12, reports and comments from the Planning Department. Mr. Sayre.
Yep, I don't have too much tonight. Just we had the development update in the packet. Also wanted to let the Planning Commission know, that's me on the screen. We don't want to see that. We are looking, coming up here October 9th to 12th, working with the Public Works Department on a temporary pilot pedestrian enhancement project. We're going to look at the area at Whalen Road by Military Ridge Drive to put some temporary crossing bump outs. That's to increase public awareness of the crossing, but also increase kind of the safety aspect of it as well too. So the Planning Department and Public Works are kind of working together on this. We're going to look at kind of reducing that crossing for a few days to coincide with National Walk and Bike to School Day to about a 28-foot crossing to try to shorten that distance and just, increase awareness of it as well. So if the Plan Commission sees it out there, that's what we're doing. We're looking at this as the initial one, and then looking potentially at other areas in the next year as well to make improvements. And the areas that we're going to focus on are existing crossings, and especially areas that have crossing guards in the morning as well too. So we have coordinated with the school, and we encourage the school to, if they could, to use this as an educational opportunity as well too. So just wanted to make the Plan Commission aware, if you see that out there, if the weather cooperates, we're going to be doing that between the 9th and the 12th. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the Plan Commissioner on that report? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 13, reports and comments from the Plan Commissioner. Any Plan Commissioners have any comments or reports? All right, seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Motion by Commissioner Bear, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no, and we are adjourned. Thank you.